All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's session over here. And of course, as usual, we'll run through the markets and highlight the opportunities available for the week so that you can keep an eye on it as well. Okay. Now, one thing to note is that the current state is that the U.S. government is in a shutdown mode. So, of course, some of the U.S. data has been impacted. If you kind of follow through from last week, supposedly we should have the non-farm payroll data, but of course, that wasn't out. Um, we do have some US data in line as well for this week here, but whether it's gonna be released, that's something that we are still uncertain, right? So very quickly, just to show you what I mean, right? So we do have a couple of data coming in the US side in terms of like CPI, PPI, retail sales. But of course, if it's not going to be out, then perhaps some of the dollar related instruments will be a little bit slower. Um, but that doesn't mean the opportunities are not there, right? So just bear that in mind. If there is, then volatility will obviously be a little bit higher. So of course, other than that, this week here we do have a couple of other related data as well. In terms of like pound, we did have it earlier today. And then, of course, on Thursday, we have the Aussie as well as the pound GDP. Okay. So bear this in mind as we are looking at the markets because sometimes this data might impact the market volatility. Okay. So, yep, with that said, let's jump into the charts for this week. Okay. So, first up here, we'll take a look at the euro. So, for me, euro dollar, we are looking at overall still towards the downside. Okay, primarily here we're looking at a simple WXY in blue, and of course here internally is a black WXY. So if this is going to be pullback, we do expect another three-wave move to complete that cycle, right? So as long as price currently remains below this swing high, we are more or less focusing more of the downside, at least for the mid-term perspective, right? But in terms of the short term here, I'm looking at a possibility of a potential buy, right? Given if, of course, the conditions fulfill itself, we are expecting a true wave push towards this zone, right, around 1.16. Okay, so if we do get some sort of a pullback on the lower time frame, then in the short term, we can actually capitalize on this pullback state. Okay, so very quickly to show you what I mean, we do have simple setups over here as well, but of course, the conditions is the market obviously needs to pull back, right? So we have a little bit of a liquidity sweep, a little bit of a double bottom if you look at it that way. We have the price actually breaking above, of course, not only that high, this high here, a couple of highs has been broken. So kind of like indicating the reversal is there, right? Of course, on the high time frame, we can see that too. Right now, what we are looking at or what we're waiting for is if we can get a pullback towards our entry zone, then obviously we have a setup that we can look into for the week, right? At least for the short term to the upside. Trade the retracement back, right? So that's one thing I'm looking at least for now, right, within the week. Then we have GBP USD. Okay, so pound dollar here slightly different from euro dollar in terms of the overall structure. But right now here we're still looking at some short term push to the upside, very similar in the short term. But from a bigger time frame or I would say bigger structure perspective, then you can see that slight difference, right? Currently here we're looking at this is a running flat, so possibility is this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and then if this is 4, we expect one more push to complete that cycle of a 5-wave move, right? So yeah, I mean right now, short term, since I'm looking at the buy trade on euro dollar, I think that's a little bit cleaner. I would not look to buy for the pound dollar, at least for the short term, right? And then if the market were to come back towards the zone, we'll then look out for a sell trade instead, right? Something like that. Okay. So that's the take on GBP USD. The key area here, obviously, somewhere between 1.32. Based on Elliott wave, if this is going to be a 5-wave cycle, then of course price cannot break where wave 1 is. Then the invalidation level will be around at 1.3320. Yeah. Okay, so that's on the pound dollar side of things. Then we have the Aussie. So Aussie over here is currently testing the 50 and 618 zone, which is great. We do see a little bit of reaction. Okay, so there are mainly two ways that we can look for a potential trade over here. Is one, price develops into a crawl, and then on the lower time frame we look for sell setups. Alternatively is, of course, price starts to come down a little bit more impulsively. Then we wait for internal correction, and then we look for the sell setup from there. Okay, Aussie dollar over here, I'm primarily looking at a bearish cycle right now, and again, if you look at it from a higher time frame perspective, this is a true wave push. This can be a pullback, and then we are expecting another true wave push to potentially break this low, right? So that's something to look out for. We don't have a clear setup as of today. But we'll see, right? If tomorrow or going into Thursday, depending on how the market is going to develop, this might open up a potential trade that we can look to maybe closer towards the end of the week, or maybe going into early next week, right? Because we do have a Aussie data coming in later part as well within the week. All right. So there's something that you want to add it into a watch list. While the setup may not be ready at this moment, but that's definitely something we can look into. Then we have dollar Canadian. So dollar Canadian is at a crossroad right now, right? We're at a key level. Price is currently a little bit of a reacting on it. There are two ways we can look for trade opportunity on this now. Overall, in terms of the mid-term, longer time frame perspective, we're still overall bullish. But depending on how price is going to develop from today onwards, we may also get a potential short-term sell, right? So if this is going to pull back corrective here, we can look to trade it one more time down to see this as an internal three-wave push, right? Then, of course, our target will be here. We won't be looking at like really huge and extended targets, but we're looking at the retracement kind of a setup. Alternatively is that if price actually continue to just give a very nice impulsive bounce back up, we will then look at it from an angle where this is all the pullback is. It came into a key level. It did some impulsive push back up. A corrective pullback here would present a buy trade opportunity. Okay, then we'll be looking at this as a 1-2 trade, right? So as of now, when the market is at a key level, key areas, we tend to be a little bit patient and we want to see how price is going to react off the zone. Then it's going to drop us more clue what's likely going to happen next, and then we plan ahead from there. Okay, so as of now, when the market is, again, as I mentioned, at key levels, it's good to start paying attention. Of course, we want to observe, from today onwards, going to tomorrow, how price is going to develop from here. That would drop clue as to how we can prepare. Okay, so this is on dollar Canadian. Then we have the dollar yen, which we had a very solid trade, last week, right? Hitting our full targets, and then the market then just bounced back up. So right now on dollar yen, my take is you probably just want to be a little bit patient. Seems like the market is in a consolidation phase. I wouldn't be too keen to be selling here, okay, because this can be all the correction is, and the market can start pushing higher. It doesn't necessarily need to come down, right? The drawing of this chart is if it comes back down, great. Then that will be an area to look for the buy. Again, I wouldn't be buying at the very, very top here. So this is more like right now probably is not going to get much. Maybe this will only build into a potential setup that we can look into maybe early next week, right? Yeah, so dollar yen, probably just going to put it aside for now. Then we have gold. So gold is coming up very, very nicely towards our key area. I would say there's a very high possibility it will just potentially break this. Okay. And we want to see, right? It'll be interesting to see how price is going to react after breaking that internal high, which also confluence with the 50 and 618. Now, if we can get some sort of a rejection here, then we can go into a lower time frame and start looking for a sell trade setup. And we'll definitely be more interested in the sell side if we can get that, at least for the near term, right? We are expecting something like this to develop. So we're expecting price to come back and retest this low. The question is more of like, can we get a sell trade setup in this zone, okay? So keep an eye on that. If price really just breaks through this without giving us some sort of a reaction, then we'll just update our analysis and potentially maybe start to look for upside from there, okay? But for now, this is what I'm sticking to. We'll see how price is going to react off the key level. Okay, very similar here is silver. It's currently testing the 618. So we want to see how price is going to react off this level here, right? If it give us a very nice little rejection from here, then this is a very classic 5-wave down, right? 3-wave move to the upside as a potential ABC, and then after that another move lower in terms of 5-wave. This can be a very classic Elliott wave kind of count and structure. Okay, but we'll see, right? We're currently testing that, so you just probably need to give it another 1 or 2 days on a 4-hour scale. You get an answer, you get some clarity in terms of like what would the market do next. Okay, so key lesson or key point to take away, at least for now, is whenever a market is at a key level or key zone, you don't want to rush things through, but it's indicating to you that you want to start paying attention because we're already entering or entered the key area, and we are then going into the next phase, which is observing how price is going to react off this key level. Okay, then from there, that gives us clue in terms of like, do we want to look for buy or do we want to look for sell? Okay, so keeping an eye on silver. Then we have crude oil. So crude oil is currently reacting off the key level, right? So this is exactly what I mean. When the market comes into a key level, okay, we want to observe how it is. So what you are looking here is that this reaction of that key zone is not something very impulsive. Okay. So in other words, as it's continued to develop, it has been taking some time, right? So the whole idea here is you want to be patient. If this gives us a V-shaped bounce, then that tells us a very different story where we can look for upside. But at this moment, giving markets a little bit sufficient time to prove itself what it wants to do, it does seems like this is looking a little bit more corrective, right? Something like this, which means this can come back down, tag the 618 before another pop. Right. So again, that's what I meant by you want to observe when the market is at key level, because it's going to give you some clue. So as of now, the clue here seems to suggest that this can actually come back down to 618 before the move back up, right? And because of that, right, you probably do not want to be looking at a buy here, right? In any case, I don't think there will be a setup based on what we're looking at. But you want to be patient and wait for price to come back down. Maybe tag the area around 58.7. Then only we start to look for a buy around that 58.67 zone, right? So that's the beauty about understanding the wave patterns, right? It kind of give you some ideas and expectation of how price is going to develop, and therefore you are able to then prepare ahead of time. Okay, so that's my take and the outlook on crude oil. Probably nothing much is going to happen within this week. We're going to see the sidelines for crude oil. Okay, then we have the S&P 500. Okay, now last week we get a very nice little tap of the internal low, and then the market gives us a V-shaped bounce. So it does indicate that this is potentially some sort of a fake internal liquidity swim, is a fake break. And this bounce is pretty impulsive, right? So if moving forward in the next 1 or 2 days, if we get a corrective pullback here, very likely this is gonna form a buy trade setup for us. Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned, a couple of weeks back, I've been overall pretty bullish on equities. I think overall this year, equities are still likely gonna end at a high note. Okay. And the bias here is definitely bullish, right? So the idea is just really, do we have the setup that allow us to buy into it? Okay. So the general focus in terms of direction on equities, in terms of the US S&P, the Nasdaq, okay, you generally would like to look for buy trade opportunity. Okay, so that's on the S&P 500. Okay, and then we have the pound yen, right? So pound yen here is something I'm also looking to potentially get involved in the upside. Pretty clean structure overall right now, right? We have this low push up 3-wave channel structure, very nice little reaction, right? So it's a V-shaped formation here. If you can get a corrective pullback, we'll be interested in the upside. Okay, to complete potentially the expectation of a 3-wave move here, right? WXY again. So we are waiting for the setup. If I go down to the lower time frame, we may get something, but right, of course, the prerequisite is that price has to respect this high. If not, then we need to readjust and recalculate our FIBs. But if the market continue to just pull back, and ideally, of course, corrective, okay, this area would be a nice little setup for us to get involved in, right? So this is a simple kind of trend continuation, a little bit of a setup on that. We do have a little bit of order block here, a little bit of fair gap here. Obviously this whole chunk here is also an order block. So yeah, right. Ideally, we want this to come down correctively. We do not want the price to come down too fast. Okay. So this setup here would likely go out in tomorrow's report as well, and then we'll keep you guys updated, right? On the validity of this particular setup. Okay. So that's the take on the pound yen, right? And then for odd yen over here, we'll be patient now. We do see a lot of V-shapes formation, in the near term here. That's why I would just stay out of the odd yen for now. There's no clear structure that's developing. But of course, if this comes down, eventually this can form into something like that. Then that gives us that clarity. Then we'll look for buy somewhere near here, right? Yeah, but that's gonna take time. It's not likely gonna happen within this week. So for this week, I think odd yen will probably just put it aside. There's really nothing much that it's worth kind of looking into, yeah. Then we have pound odd. Pound odd, I'm also actually having it in my watch list this week, right? The only thing I'm not flagging this yet is because price is still kind of making some inner new low, right? Because if this starts to pull back, we will definitely get a setup, okay? If we get a pullback, okay? So what I'm waiting here is essentially for the market to establish an inner low, right? And then starts to show signs of a retracement. On the lower time frame, we'll definitely get a setup. Okay, now whether the setup is going to tag us in, that's another story. But right now, what I'm seeing is 100% we're going to get a setup if the market starts to pull back, right? And why I'm interested in the sell side is because if you look at how this is developing, right, we have like interesting lows here, or I would say key lows here, that the market took it out, come back and retest it very nicely, and we have that inner little impulse push. So this kind of indicate that, right, this area seems to be supported, or I would say not supported, but this area seems to be acting as a nice little resistance. And of course, this move here is not that impulsive. So overall direction, we are anticipating that market might take out this low and even move lower from there, right? So we are generally bearish bias, okay? And just to very, very quickly take you down to the lower time frame, you can see why I say there will be a setup if the market starts to pull back, right? Because the conditions are all there, right? We have this liquidity sweep with this break of structure. This entire move here, we have a little bit of the block. We have fair gap there. So for sure, there will be a setup, okay? The thing is this going to be the low where the market starts to pull back? We don't know yet, right? Because the market can continue to move lower, and then we need to keep adjusting that in terms of like fit ratios. So that's the reason I'm not pulling it yet. But if by tomorrow we start to see sign of a pullback, then obviously that's where the setup kick in, right? So I think that's very, very going to be, I would say this is going to be very, very similar to the pound yen, right? Where we can then look into that for potential trade setups, okay? Lastly here to touch on is the Bitcoin, okay? So overall, you can see that it's generally still in a consolidation phase. From a trading point of view, I would just say you want to stay out for this. There's really no clear directional bias to be focusing on, right? Until we get some clean little impulsive move. Right now, this is just not the clearest structure of all. Okay. Yeah, I would personally just stay out for now. This can be a valid three-wave development, right? Which might opens up more upside, of course, okay? But I feel that it's not worth based on where we are now and then the overall structure development, it's just not worth paying too much attention at this moment, okay? So just telling you that there's a possibility that this three wave is completed and we can see upside. But I need more confirmation from the market. Okay, I need more confirmation from the market before I can commit to the direction. So overall for Bitcoin, still going to be a little bit more on the patient side and the neutral side of things, okay? Right? So it's not really going to be something, I would say it's not going to be something this week where we're going to get a lot of trades or a lot of things to keep an eye on. Personally, those the ones that I flag are generally the ones that I'm going to be a little bit more focused on. But we'll see, okay? Because some of this here, as the market develops again, can be quite quite nice to suddenly get, new opportunities and things like this, right? But as of today, based on what we're seeing, euro dollar, pound yen, pound Australia, those are the three that I'm gonna focus a little bit more. Good. Okay, so very, very quickly, I see a question here from Dove, or pronounce your name hopefully correctly. Asking, is it good to sell EuroCAD around the 1.6275, right? Take a look at EuroCAD, and see how it goes. Okay, so this was actually done, I think, like last time when one of you probably requested the Euro Canadian pair. 1.6250 gonna be somewhere around the zone. Yeah, I mean it's a pretty okay idea to sell it there, right? Because the whole analysis over here, to me, it's still suggesting downside, right? The only slightly tricky part that you want to pay a little bit more attention is, will this pull back into something like this, right? Because I tend to see the market as like developed in sets of trees as a complete cycle, right? So you can see here 1, 2, 3. So this might develop something like that as well, right? But of course, nothing is certain. We will know for sure, is this going to be going to the maybe 618 zone, or this is all the correction, right? So obviously, as a trader, you can't go for perfection. You can't go for 100% certainty, right? So the idea of this is then you ask yourself, are you willing to take the risk to write on the probability that you can be potentially correct? Okay, it's all about making the assessment. Is it worth taking the risk? Are you willing, okay, to actually take on that risk? So if you take a look at EuroCAD, then of course you want to ask yourself the question is, do you have a valid setup, right? I mean, over here you can see that we have based on the setup I use, right? We have a little bit of double top liquidity structure there. We clear off some of this low. Obviously, there's a huge feather gap, right? If this pulls back correctively, this is definitely a valid setup. Okay. So the question again is more like, all right, if I have a valid setup, the next step is to ask yourself, okay, how much risk am I gonna put in, right? So if today you don't feel very, very convicted, you don't feel very comfortable, confident in this trade, then maybe you want to reduce your risk. Okay, or maybe not even take it, right? But again, bear in mind that nothing is certain. So if you don't take it, you need to be also clear. You need to ask yourself, like, okay, so why you're not taking it, right? What's that element or the factor that kind of prompt you not to take it? Okay, so you need to gain clarity from all these aspects, all these little micro decisions that you make. Because as you dive deeper and you gain clarity of that, that's where you can then start to distinguish, what are the elements that help you make your decision. Okay, because if today you kind of go by your gut feel, then it's not going to be consistent, right? Because what you won't know for sure, like, what's going to contribute to it. Okay. Now, if you ask me, I don't trade or I don't look at the EuroCAD on a regular basis. But if you ask me, is this a trade that I'm going to be willing to take? The answer is yes, right? Because I know that, all right, if I'm going to take this trade, I'm going to put in 1% risk, for example. I have a potential reward of more than 2, right? Because if I'm going to take this trade, obviously, okay, if let's say it's somewhere there, right, my risk is on top. Obviously, it's not going to be just here, right? I'm going to aim for, like, really, like, squeezing this as a 3-wave move. So my risk reward ratio is definitely going to be very, very huge. Okay. I mean very huge, obviously. Just give you a very, very quick one here, right? Right. We're going to take something like that. The risk reward ratio, right? Just a very, very rough estimate. If you go by here, it's going to be 1:2, right? But as I mentioned, this actually opens up the possibility of going further. So just a very, very quick one. If I were to do a simple 1:1 measurement, right? Obviously, this will open up all the way until close to 7, right? 1:7 RR. But if I'm a little bit more conservative, I'm going to just aim here. It's about 1:3, right? Or I can, go for slightly a little bit more extended. This will open up like close to 1:5, right? So to me, like, a risk of 1R to potentially make back 3R, 5R is something that I'm very, very comfortable with. Okay, and of course, it's not about just getting involved in a trade blindly, right? Because this is technically a valid setup all the conditions are there. The only part that I'm aware that probably you want to be a little bit careful is that this can be something like that, which means then if you sell it here, this might tag your stop loss, right? But as I mentioned, it's not 100% certain, right? There's no certainty in the market. So again, these are little kind of micro decisions that you need to decide on, right? So that's hopefully clear on it. Okay, quick question here. I see also is what's my view on dollar Canadian? So let's take a look at dollar franc, right? Dollar franc. Yeah, so dollar franc is downside. So I think this was again done last week when some of you guys are actually asking for it. I would say downside. So generally, you wait for a pullback, then you want to look for a sell trade setup, right? Obviously, you don't want to sell at the bottom. Okay, you want to wait for the pullback before you sell. Okay, and then of course the invalidation level will be there. Is it a divergence on H1 Bitcoin? I don't think there is technically divergence unless you're referring to this. Then yeah, in a way, yeah. Okay, but again, you want to ask yourself, what's your setup, right? What's the conditions for you to take the trade? Is it solely based on divergence, or you need some extra confirmation from price patterns or price action, etc., right? But if you're referring to this, yeah, there is some sort of a divergence happening. Okay, another one here I see is question about the euro pound. So euro pound, you mentioned that you have a buy around here. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't be able to give you much insights upon like your trade, right? Because I wouldn't know the details of your trade setups. I wouldn't know the details of your trade plan as well, right? But the idea here is if you're buying this and then you mentioned you have a stop around like 8785, 8760, right? Which is probably somewhere around that low, right? If it's me, if I have this tight stop loss and the price is already moved here, I would, number one, obviously shift my stops to break even, right? That's for sure. That's how I'm going to manage it. But whether you want to hold it for further upside or not, then again, that goes back to what's the strategy, right? What's your trade plan? Okay? Because I can't give you an answer right now. I have no idea what your trade plan is. The whole idea here is you want to follow back the trade setups and your trading plan. Okay? But from a trade management perspective, you can see that, you know, if today you kind of took this trade here, you stop this here, the current RR is more than 1:1, right? It's currently riding around 1:2. It's obviously a very good opportunity to shift stops to break even, to kind of mitigate your risk, right? So this trade becomes what we call a risk-free trade. And then it's really up to you how you want to manage the balance of it. Okay. Great. So we have another question here about the pound dollar GBP USD, right? Completed for our three-wave structure. Can we expect more upside? I would say this is what I'm looking at, right? If I zoom out a little bit more, is this gonna be the bottom? Again, we won't know for sure. Can this be a three-wave cycle where this pops up and then, you know, this is the bigger cycle? Yes, right? So the clue on that is really monitoring how the market is gonna form here, right? I mean, if this is gonna be corrective, then obviously this would potentially indicate more upside. But the confirmation of this being the low is, number one, we see an impulsive move. Number two, we want to see some of this invalidation level taken out, right? Then that will indicate that there's a very, very high possibility this entire down cycle is completed and we're starting to see a new up cycle. Okay, so you can literally, from any wave perspective, right, take things from a wave to wave basis, right? So you always kind of anticipate like what's gonna happen next first. Then, of course, if you want to take a step further, you can then look at, all right, if this happens, how am I going to project next? If this happens, how am I going to project even further, right? You are able to do that, but from a trading point of view on a day-to-day basis, you just want to be coming back to like what's the most relevant opportunity you can actually look into. Okay, so for me, I wouldn't be too eager to be anticipating this is the low and then start buying. One other reason I'm not doing that is also because I'm also monitoring on euro dollar, right, which I kind of share with you guys, right? I'm looking at euro dollar upside over here, so I don't want to be overly exposed, on quite correlated kind of instruments on this and pound dollar, right? So hopefully that's clear. Good. So yeah, I hope today's session over here generally has been clear, has been quite straightforward. Okay, and of course giving you guys some insights into what to look out for and what to prepare for the week. Right? So I think that's generally all. Yeah. So hopefully it helps you guys. All the best for the week, and I'll see you guys in next week's session. Okay. Good night. See you guys.